Good morning, everyone. Okay, chapter 7. 2 more chapters and we're almost done. Then I'd like to do a study group on this. All right, so chapter 7 of the Queen Code by Alison Armstrong. Beyond the Damsel in Distress. Roll found his process fascinating. It made him wonder how it would work at home with Sally. Let me see if I got this straight, he replied. You're saying that if you had it all your way, you and your team would have the day off after month end, with pay. Kimberly nodded and smiled. Yes. And what would that provide for you is what again? He asked. He had been taken aback by the sincerity and smooth logic of her unprecedented request that he wanted to hear more. Month end exhausts us. We spend all our energy and concentration getting every policy issue that we possibly can, she began. And as you pointed out in the previous conversation, this is what keeps the agents happy and productive. Yeah, I got that part, he prompted. But the next day we're so tired. We start the new month making all sorts of mistakes that we have to find before month end, she stated intently. We're going backwards from the beginning, but we don't have to. If we had a day of rest to recover from the push, we'd all be more productive, effective, and happy. He couldn't argue with her more. It had made too much sense. If, in fact, it could be the solution to one of the biggest complaints, careless mistakes that cost precious time. But he thought of something. What if month end is on a Friday? Then you already have the time to recover. Kimberly's eyes squinted and her lips pursed. After a moment, she said, You're right about having time to recover, but there's another side. Besides the time off making us more effective, it would make our hard work feel appreciated. And people who feel appreciated work way harder. Don't the production bonuses make you feel appreciated, he asked, dismayed. She nodded. Of course they do. But when you're exhausted or pissed because you have to spend your weekend recovering from your job, money in the future doesn't have the same effect as in the present. She paused and looked like she was considering saying more. Yes, he encouraged. It's just that... She hesitated and took a deep breath. I'm learning from my grandmother that men play for points, and the trick is giving the points in the currency of highest value. My guys like raises and bonuses, sure, but they'll do more for a smile and a pat on the back. It's more immediate. Her eyes widened and he wondered why. Hoping his prompting would keep working again, he said, Yes? She grinned. This week we're learning that what men need is critical and urgent, that many of men's needs are immediate. We talked about food and sleep and whatnot, but I think appreciation may be another one. Rawl was intrigued. The effect of Kimberly giving up frog farming had been obvious and delightful, but he had no idea her grandmother understood men so well. He nodded. Again, you have a point. Okay, I'll agree to give your gang having the day off after month end, and the following Monday if it's a Friday. Then he thought of something. But you're going to have to write the memo that convinces the salespeople that starting the new month a day late is to their advantage. He was rewarded with a huge smile and she looked like she wanted to hug him. He couldn't help but smile in return. If only it was this easy with all his employees. Hey, Kimberly, can I ask you a question about your grandmother? She shrugged. Sure. You know that some of the ladies were not too thrilled with you abandoning the castration club? And their noses were bent out of joint for a while, he said, and she nodded. But a few of them have mentioned how well the guys are treating you these days, and they're curious about it. I think they really want to know what you know. Her eyes opened wide in surprise. Really? Wow, cool. And I was wondering if your grandmother knew something about working with women which men could benefit from. She shrugged again. I'm not sure. She seems to know everything. It's like talking to an encyclopedia, she added, smiling, except never boring. Well, if she does, it could be useful around here. I'd like to get the rest of the office running as well as your department is. Kimberly, still high from her conversation with Rawl, felt optimistic about seeing Melissa for the first time since their falling out. She had never expected her lessons with Claudia to affect her work. Maybe she would be as successful with her friend. Melissa's welcome was genuine in its warmth for Kimberly, but falsely cheerful. This conversation was superficial all through dinner, and Kimberly tried to concentrate on Melissa's young sons. Her study of men was making her curious about the smaller variety. Look how focused they are on eating, she thought, and observed how Melissa attempted to connect with them anyhow. She suspected that Scott's close relationship with the boys made her feel left out and vulnerable. Melissa's obvious frustration about their lack of response to her jokes finally provoked Kimberly, and she commented without thinking, "They're focused, Em. Wait until they're done eating and then tell your eggplant joke." Big mistake. Kimberly's shoulders stiffened and her nostrils flared. "Now you're going to tell me how to interact with my own children?" Kimberly started to react and then remembered how Claudia always asked permission before teaching them anything. "I'm sorry, Melissa, you're right. I didn't ask you didn't ask for my advice." That seemed to calm her down, and Kimberly ventured, "Did you express an interest in what I was learning from my grandmother?" "About Scott, yes," she said tersely. "Not the boys." Kimberly squelched her reaction to the objectification of John and Bradley. Melissa had always lumped the two together and referred to them that way. Kimberly briefly wondered how that affected them. Perhaps that's what Scott offers, she thought, treating them as unique individuals. "Okay, clear," was all Kimberly said, and committed to eating her vegetables. The rest of the dinner conversation was stilted. Melissa inquired about her job and her love life. Kimberly made general statements, reluctant to give any details. She didn't even mention Jack at all. After the dishes were cleared, Melissa made herself a drink and offered Kimberly one. She declined and poured herself some water. Melissa put Sarah down for the night and set the boys up with the Disney movie in their room. She brought her drink in a conspicuous box of tissues to the coffee table. Settling on the couch, she faced Kimberly and croaked coarsely, "I think Scott's having an affair." Kimberly was shocked. "What makes you think that?" Melissa shrugged. "Just a feeling. Remember the company picnic you couldn't come to? It was the first time you went to see your grandmother about men," Kimberly nodded. "Well, there was a big-boobed brunette, and the way she talked to Scott made me nauseous. I ignored it at the time, but now I'm worried. She's at the office with him all day and night." Kimberly studied her friend's face. Whatever their differences, she felt she owed Melissa her loyalty. "What can I do?" she asked. Melissa responded, "Is there anything you've learned from your grandma that could help me? I do love him, you know." She looked small and vulnerable, the spitfire gone. Kimberly felt sorry for her and awful about her. "I've been having the time of my life and she's falling apart. Some best friend I am." She remembered the rule not to teach anyone unless what she was learning, but Claudia said that so long ago, and she clearly wants Karen to teach other women. She puzzled over that for a moment and finally thought, well, what could it hurt to tell her a few things? She recalled how many times she had thought of Scott and Melissa when she was learning about men playing for points. Maybe that could help. "I've learned too much over this last month to teach you everything in one evening," she began, "but there is something I learned on Saturday that might help." "What's that?" Melissa asked, tucking her legs under her. Kimberly thought about how to present what she wanted to convey. "I recently learned that men play for points in every part of their lives. That's why many of them get hooked on video games, because they get points for every effort and bigger points for tougher challenges." "Oh, that's totally childish," Melissa responded with a sneer. "But what if it isn't?" Kimberly asked, trying to get through. "What if there's a good reason for it?" "You're not starting on a good reason bullshit again, are you? Where it's all my fault," Melissa snapped, leaning towards her aggressively. Kimberly took a breath and calmly replied, "Melissa, you asked for help. Do you want it or not?" Melissa leaned back. "I'm sorry. Yes, I want it." She sipped her gin and tonic. "Tell me more about playing for points. But can you leave out the video games?" "But that's it. We can learn from video games how to have men play for our points." "Now you're talking. How do I get Scott to play for my points instead of big tits?" She practically crackled. The hair went up on the back of Kimberly's neck. "I'm being overly sensitive," she thought. Naturally, she is hurt and angry and scared. She tried another attack. "Men play for points because they are providers. They want to make a difference. Points is a way of saying that they succeeded with us by providing something that really mattered. Like Karen, my grandmother's other student. She really needs her husband to take out the trash. Claudia told her to explain to her husband that what it would provide to her, and now he's doing it. It can be a simple thing they do every once in a while, or something they do every day. Melissa asked aggressively, "Are you saying he should get points for providing a paycheck by doing something that I can't get him to stop doing? He loves his work more than anything else." Kimberly sighed, discouraged. What if he spends that much time at work because he gets a lot of points there, because his clients respect him and his co-workers admire him? And that should be more important than his family? That's so immature, Melissa sneered. Kimberly felt stymied and frustrated. What she said was being twisted into different contexts. It's not about being mature or immature. It's about understanding the way men are so we can bring out the best in them. Right now, everybody but me is getting the best of Scott. He treats me like shit, and when I complain about it, he looks at me like I'm ridiculous. Melissa burst into tears. Kimberly took her drink from her and set it down. Then she gathered her friend in her arms. "Cry it out, Em. Just get it all out." She held Melissa while the smaller woman's body was racked one cascade of sobs after another. She felt her shoulders get wet with tears and snot and didn't care. Her heart hurt for her friend. After a long time, Melissa sat up and grabbed a handful of tissues. Blowing her nose loudly several times, she cleaned herself up and then noticed Kimberly's blouse. "I'm sorry," she said. "No biggie. I've got a dry cleaner's that's a miracle worker," Kimberly joked. Melissa smiled at the feeble attempt to cheer her. "Thanks. I needed that." "You're welcome, you know. I read somewhere that tears carry a depressant hormone out of the body. That's why we feel better after a good cry." I'll need more than one then," Melissa cried. At that moment, the sound of the garage door open startled Melissa to her feet. "I can't let him see me crying," she said, quickly gathering up the pile of tissues and heading for the kitchen trash. Scott came through the door from the garage as Melissa opened the cupboard, revealing a receptacle full to the brim. Melissa set herself in Scott's path, her legs wide. A chill of foreboding went up Kimberly's spine, seeing Melissa's taunt features in profile. Pointing at the trash, her voice edged with disdain, she said, "Good, you're finally home. Now you can take the trash out." Melissa glanced over at Kimberly, and the glare in her eye made Kimberly gasp. "And what that would provide," she said to Scott with a sneer, "is me thinking you're good for something more than money." Scott's body deflated. He lowered his head and said, "Sure, Em, as soon as I change out of my suit." He headed towards her bedroom, passing right by Kimberly on the sofa. She was watching his face closely, and when he glanced at her with a low, "Hey, Kimberly," she saw pain and defeat in his eyes. Kimberly felt nauseous and ashamed. The precious gift her mother gave her had been turned against a man, a good man, and it was her fault. She quietly gathered her purse and headed for the door. Melissa noticed and came after her. "Why are you leaving?" "I did what you said. I told him to take out the trash. I told him what it would provide. And you heard him. He's going to do it. That's the point, right?" Melissa's eyes were hot and defensive. Kimberly shook her head. "The point is partnership, Melissa. Partnership. All you're interested in is manipulating and diminishing Scott. I won't help you with that." She opened the door and headed for a car. She kept walking even as Melissa shouted back at her, "You need to get your head out of the clouds, Kimmy. Men are assholes." Yikes. Claudia heard Kimberly ask plaintively, "Grandmother," she was immediately worried by the distress in Kimberly's voice on the other end of the phone. "Are you okay, my dear?" She heard Kimberly choke up and then say in a rush, "I did something terrible tonight. I broke my promise not to teach your information to anyone. I thought it would be okay, but it wasn't. It was awful." "Would you like to tell me what happened?" Claudia said gently, shaking but not compelled to add to Kimberly's guilt. "It's my best friend. Well, my used-to-be best friend, Melissa," Kimberly said. "She thinks her husband is having an affair. I tried teaching her about men being providers and playing for points. I kept searching for ways to get through to her, but I failed." "Is that all?" Kimberly encouraged, knowing Kimberly would be best served by a full confession. "Oh, Grandmother, it was terrible. She told Scott to take out the trash, not asking, telling. And then, she choked up again. She used the word provide, word in the most demeaning way." Claudia heard her trying to get a grip on herself. She continued, Scott was crushed. I feel awful. I didn't even know such a thing could happen. I still think I'm in shock. There, my dear, Claudia said, attempting to reach her arms around Kimberly with her voice. I'm sorry, Grandmother. You told us not to, and I promised, but I had no idea it would turn out this ugly. She heard Kimberly blow her nose and then continue. You knew, didn't you? I have never seen it myself, Claudia answered honestly. The covenant prohibiting teaching others is 9 generations old. But I heard stories from my grandmother. They were passed down as a precaution, and she added regretfully, It was my mistake not to relay them to you and to Karen. Have you heard of anything as bad as this, Kimberly asked. Claudia couldn't tell what answer she hoped for. Actually, yes, she replied. Anytime you have a suspicion of infidelity, you are going to encounter the worst of adversarial behavior. What do you mean? Kimberly asked, and Claudia heard her anguish lighten up with curiosity. Good, she thought. She is not likely to do something like this again. Might as well have her deepen her understanding of needs. Neither men nor women understand why infidelity happens. The victim thinks it is unprecedented. That does not mean it is never, but in most cases, infidelity is both predictable and preventable. Can you say more? Certainly. Claudia gathered her thoughts. This fits perfectly with what you have been learning about men's needs being critical and urgent. And the biggest need they have for women is the need for positive, life-giving attention. But don't women need attention too, Kimberly asked. Absolutely. That's the point. Both men and women need attention. In fact, there is no relationship without it. Paying attention to one another creates the moments of connectedness, but not in any kind of attention. We need attention in the forms of respect, appreciation, admiration, listening, and sharing, trust and companionship. Claudia sighed. Most women pay plenty of negative attention to their husbands and their boyfriends and their sons. Anger and criticism, resentment and suspicion, emasculation, domination, not because they intend to, but because that is the natural outcome of thinking men are misbehaving. There was a long pause before Kimberly replied. That sounds about right for Melissa and Scott. The reality that both sexes have been unwilling to face is that human beings need positive, affirming attention. It is one of the 4 food groups. They must have it, and not getting it will almost always cause the disloyalty that is called infidelity. She continued, regardless of any commitment they have made, eventually women and men will seek attention. For men, because of single focus, it is usually when they have totally given up on getting what they need from their mate. For women, because of diffuse awareness, they seem to wander off to the first person who gives them attention that they are starving for. It sounds like Melissa is likely to be unfaithful to Scott as he is to her, Kimberly responded. That is what the statistics say. While women assume that men are more likely to be unfaithful, it's not true. Wow, Kimberly reacted, followed by a long pause. Now the question you gave Karen to ask Mike seems to be more important. Claudia smiled to herself, glad to hear Kimberly made the connection. Yes, asking your partner whether they be man or woman, is there anything you need from me that you have given up on getting, can save a relationship. Asking, is there anything you need from me that you are about to give up on getting? Or is there anything you need from me that is really hard to get? What could head problems off early? What if they both given up? Kimberly asked, her voice sad. It only takes one person to turn a relationship around. Men, especially, respond immediately to a good kind of attention. Oh, she heard Kimberly gasp. Yes, dear? You're not talking about romantic relationships, are you? She responded. Why do you ask? Because I've seen it happen. I was the only one who changed. I started paying attention to my processing men in a different way, in a positive way. After I gave up the idea that they were misbehaving, she said excitedly, and they responded immediately. The same with Royal and Jack. I wouldn't believe the changes in them if I hadn't seen them with my own eyes. Claudia detected a difference in the way Kimberly and Jack said Jack's name, but she did not want to pry. It really is that simple, dear. I am thrilled to see that, Claudia said. I wish everyone could, especially Melissa and Scott, Kim answered. Not everyone has your courage and willingness, Kimster. Never underestimate the importance of that. Thank you. I thought I was ordinary. Now I'm seeing myself and Karen in a new light. Claudia heard her hesitate. Grandmother? Yes, Claudia replied. 2 questions. First, am I going to have to get new friends? Kimberly asked, and Claudia heard the pain in her voice. Twice I fled Melissa's house because I couldn't stand seeing her emasculating men. And the women at work are getting on my nerves. I feel like I have to protect my men from them. Claudia sighed, feeling a similar pain and loneliness. I will not lie to you, Kimster. To know men is to love them. And the more you do, the more painful it will be for you to see how ordinary women treat them. I have very few friends, and none that I am as close to as you and Karen, because you share my point of view and are beginning to share my reality. She heard Kimberly mirror her sigh. I understand. Now I appreciate why you waited to teach 2 of us. I'm grateful Karen and I have each other. And you. Claudia smiled to herself. And your other question? If I'm not teaching the material, can I use the terms I know in a discussion? Claudia thought Kimberly sounded embarrassed, but she needed more detail. Can you tell me the context of the discussion? Jack and I are talking tomorrow night, and I want to find out all the things he taught us. You know, when Mike joined us? Claudia could practically hear her squirming. Mercifully, she responded as vaguely. I think that is perfectly fine, my dear. Asking a partner about those things or sharing what they are for you can be a great gift and a great beginning. Claudia was rewarded with a giggle. She is really going to be fine, she thought, filled with relief. Thank goodness. Jack was so grateful they were having the discussion by telephone. Sitting on a bar stool alone in his game room, he didn't have to work to conceal his shock and amazement. Who is this woman, he wondered for the 100th time. He had agreed to talk about sex with Kim on the phone, Tuesday night, for her sake, he thought. Jack considered himself a man who knew his way around the bedroom, but the concept of a delicious sexual partnership had never occurred to him. His greatest challenge was matching her honesty and the forthright information she was providing. She has the darndest way of making me want to show myself. He took another gulp of water and dove into her second question. Well, since, as I just said, sex provides a great physical release and gives me a sense of calm and peace and focus. What's the term again? Pumpkin hours. He chuckled at the imaginary of the coach turning into a pumpkin and recalled Kim quoting her grandmother. When you can't give anyone a ride, I'd like to meet this Claudia. She sounds like one grand dame. Yeah, pumpkin hours. Well, truthfully, my favorite time to have sex is early in the morning, on a Sunday. There's time to lie around afterwards or continue as long as you like, and I'm left relaxed and happy all day. During the week, it would leave me clear-headed and focused for work. He paused, but she didn't have anything to say. Ideally, wow, I've never told anyone this. Sex would happen before the stock exchange opened at 6:30 a.m. Pacific time. Okay, that's the ideal time for you to have sex, Kim replied, sounding much calmer than he felt. But pumpkin hours are the times when it doesn't work for you. Like, for example, if I call you at 10 p.m. and invited you over, would that be welcome or an imposition? Would you be thrilled or become resentful? Jack couldn't imagine any time he was invited to have sex with her being an imposition. He'd been fascinated about it for years. Then he remembered she was talking about real life. Truthfully, since I do get up early on the weekdays, after 10 o'clock at night would cost me. But 9 would be cool, except on Friday. After working all week, I need to chill out. I'm no good to anyone for anything. Thank you, Kim responded, and Jack felt genuinely appreciated for his honesty. So, what do you think, he asked. If I had it all my way, she began, and he was intrigued by the combination of if and all my way. He was used to a woman being grossly accommodating for a completely demanding pain in the ass. This middle ground was appealing. Since I want to have sex with you 2 or 3 times a week, she continued, and Jack almost fell off his seat. Holy crap! His entire physical being had immediately responded to her words. She wants me! Besides the typical reaction, his upper chest burned with a heat he was unaccustomed to. Realizing he hadn't been listening, Jack interrupted her. Sorry, Kim, you lost me at, I want to have sex with you. If you keep talking like that, I'm going to show up at your door. She giggled. I guess that's a jump start for you. A jump start? You know, bringing on a dead battery to life, Kimberly said playfully. Or something that takes you from 0 to 60 and nothing flat. Besides your Porsche, that is. Jack loved the analogy and was touched that she remembered his beloved car. It reminded him that he promised her the more conventional kind of ride. Kim, from the moment I first saw you, my battery has never been dead around you, he responded sincerely. She laughed and snorted. Adorable. He was reminded that she wasn't entirely comfortable with the conversation either. Maybe that was the reason for the sudden change of subject. Jack, can I ask you, how old are you? Just turned 43. Why? Well, I'm 31 and I've been a little nervous about our age difference. Kim, relationships aren't about age. Huge differences or no differences in either direction for either sex. He was adamant. No matter what you think is lined up, age or income, religion or politics, it doesn't matter. It comes down to whether two people can provide what the other needs and make each other happy. Oh, I love that. There was a long silence on the other end. Finally, she asked, what do you need, Jack? Her patient silence gave him the chance to think. I need to be respected, he said, and trusted and appreciated for mostly who I am as a man, and secondarily for what I have accomplished. He paused, and again she waited. This must be what Royal was talking about, how she really listens. I could get used to this. He continued, I need sex, not merely the act, the connection, the giving and receiving. In the silence that followed, he looked deeper and was surprised at what he found. Should I say it? Nothing but goodness and opportunity has come of telling her the truth thus far, and I think I need to be your hero. Kim gasped. After a long moment, he asked gently, Kim, you all right? She sniffled and replied softly, that's the most amazing thing anyone has ever said to me. Jack felt his chest swell, though. Good. See you Saturday night, then. Pick you up at 5, she replied. Should I be ready for dinner? You should be ready to come over to my house, and we'll find out what jump starts you. But, she stuttered, I thought you had to wait a week or 10 days for the results. Jack was grinning even though she couldn't see it. I paid extra to get them by Friday, he responded. I'll have flight clearance. Kimberly giggled nervously, and Jack was reminded that, for all her fascinating knowledge and astonishing honesty, this was still an area in which she needed his help. Don't worry, Kim. We'll take it as slow as you need it to be. Thanks, Jack. Bert scratched his cheek. The doctor didn't find anything. Claudia shook her head and squeezed the back of her other hand. All the regular tests did not show a significant decline since last time. In fact, as you know, the arthritis has improved. The swelling's down. She is looking deeper into the source of my exhaustion. They took a lot of blood, and we will get some results next week. Bert pulled Claudia into his arms and held her, his chest tight with fear. Will you at least cancel Wednesday night's session? I think twice a week's schedule may have something to do with your fatigue. He felt Claudia nod against him, and he felt a little bit relieved. That will probably work better for Karen and Kimberly anyways. They both have big weeks already planned, she said. Karen waved goodbye to the last student and began packing the materials on her desk. After a while, she noticed she'd been humming. I'm happy, she thought, and wondered why. It was the last day before a break in the school year, and she should be completely wiped out. But she wasn't. It worked, she thought, ecstatic. I love deal making. What Mike said about being able to heat things up in a microwave and provide to be the key. On several occasions, Karen had visited her folks in Chicago and left behind a whole refrigerator and freezer full of cooked meals, but it never occurred to her to do it for herself. Funny how we always take better care of others, she thought. Mike had liked her idea and wanted to participate. When she returned from the grocery store on Sunday, he sat at the kitchen counter and chopped to her heart's content. They made bean soup, an egg salad, a huge green salad, lasagna, enchilada casserole, and a whole grain blend she could heat up or eat cold. Then he'd helped her parcel things out into meal-sized containers. Some went in the refrigerator and the rest went in the freezer. All week he'd been in charge of dinner. She told him honestly that she'd be happy with anything, and each night he picked out what to reheat. He set the table, served the food, and cleaned up afterward. Now that's my kind of man. Every day she found her lunch packed and ready to go. She felt like a princess. No, she felt like a queen. And the handsome knight was well rewarded, she thought. When have I ever wanted to make love this time of year? But he saved her from a hell week, and she was catching on. His favorite form of appreciation was her warm body against his. How nice, she thought, smiling as she finished packing up her personal effects. She recalled their conversation the night before when she finally gotten up the courage to ask Mike the big, scary question. She could never have anticipated his answer. The only thing I've given up on is lingerie, he replied. She hoped he was kidding, but when she examined his face, it was clear he was serious. Really, she asked, still disbelieving. You always say you're too old or too fat for lingerie, but that's crazy. I love your body, and this cowboy loves for you to dress up. She had suppressed her usual reaction of defending her position. Instead, she thought about what he needed and to give Mike what he needed. Okay, cowboy, she replied, and he instantly perked up. I'll do it. On one condition. You have to come with me and pick out something you would love to see me in. He grinned. If I had it all my way, I'd come with you and we'd pick out something we both loved you in. Imagine if it turned you on, too. She smiled again and thought, and I was afraid of that question? Claudia thought about how to introduce today's hero language. Two of the most difficult words and concepts for a contemporary woman to grasp. She also felt compelled to address what had happened between Kimberly and Melissa. She could not let it go. There was too much at stake. Bert was watching her, monitoring from his newspaper, while trying to conceal his attentiveness. Ever the provider, her well-being was paramount to him. I will have to take it easy today, she thought, and make sure I do not expend too much energy. Then she had an idea and brightened. Perfect. My love, she said softly, testing how difficult it would be to get his attention. Yes, sweetheart, Bert responded promptly, looking up from the newspaper. He was only pretending to read. Could you help me today? She watched as he instantly straightened. Yes, of course. What do you need? I need help with today's topic. I think your perspective and way of articulating things would help Karen and Kimberly understand better, and at the same time, save me a lot of energy. Shall I join you from the beginning, he asked. She shook her head. No, I have to address another issue first. Could I single you somehow and then when I need you? Sure, I'll be in the shop. Wave when you're ready. But how can I be sure that you'll be watching? He looked over at her, his reading glasses, eyes crinkled with amusement. Oh, I'm pretty sure you always know when I'm watching. Otherwise, you would not have interrupted me reading the newspaper. She laughed, caught his eyes echoed, his smile echoed her delight. Kimberly tried not to squirm in her seat. I deserve this, she thought. Claudia began her story. The covenant prohibiting us from teaching anyone other than our own daughters or a granddaughter we raised has been in place for 9 generations. That means this took place about 2 centuries ago. She paused for a sip of her tea. One of my great-grandmothers, Elizabeth, had been teaching Faith, a neighbor she thought would use the information well in her partnership with her husband. Unbeknownst to her, Faith had been relaying the lessons to her own daughter who had been having a troubled marriage. During that time, Elizabeth, Faith, and her daughter were holding a meeting after church services to plan a potluck dinner. They needed to circle some chairs for each of the women to sit. Faith saw her son-in-law nearby and said, Harold, we need chairs. Would you please provide them for us? Kimberly noted how Faith used the 2 words in the hero's language together. Claudia continued. Harold responded as most men would. He was glad to provide, counted the women standing, and collected the right number of chairs. When he had circled them around and stood looking at the arrangement proudly, the daughter said loudly, Harold, you imbecile, my mother completely manipulated you with those ridiculous two heroes' words. Kimberly felt sick to her stomach as she imagined a crestfallen Harold. From victory to shame in one cruel sentence, tears escaped her eyes and she reached for a tissue. Claudia concluded. Elizabeth was horrified and became one of the biggest proponents of the covenant. She was stricken by the damage the information could cause in the hands of someone with an adversarial relationship to men. I'm terribly sorry, Grandmother, Kimberly said. By breaking my promise, I betrayed your covenant as well. I caused exactly what you were afraid would happen. Melissa asked me for help, and I gave in. Karen said, looking panicked. Does this mean you won't allow us to teach each other, Claudia? Claudia sipped her tea, then closed her eyes. Lips pursed. Is she praying, Kimberly wondered? She held her breath, not so much for herself as for Karen, to whom she knew this meant the world. After what seemed an eternity, Claudia looked earnestly at each of them. During Karen's lessons that year, I began to believe that there were thousands, perhaps millions of women who are ready for this information. Women who are tired of being angry, hurt, and frustrated in their relationships with men. Women who would be willing to lay down their sword if only they could see its damage. Women who would use the language of heroes as it was intended to bring out the best in men and both women. For men and women. Both. Claudia paused and Kimberly held still as she searched their faces. But, Claudia resumed, we cannot assume that because a woman says she wants to help that she is ready to accept it. You must promise me that you won't teach the hero language to anyone who has not yet given up the right to emasculate men forever. Karen let out her breath and Kimberly gulped. That was my mistake, she thought. Melissa rejected all of my attempts to point out emasculation as the cause of her troubles. She wouldn't accept any responsibility. That should have been my first clue. Grandmother? Yes, dear. Would a woman's willingness to consider that a man might be responding to her or have a good reason for what he does be good signs that she's ready for information? It's not a guarantee, but I think it may herald that possibility. Claudia replied, and Kimberly was reminded of Claudia's advanced age by the archaic terms in her vocabulary. She looked closely at the elderly woman and noticed how tired she appeared. Her shoulders looked even more tiny than usual, and there was a weariness in the normally bright blue eyes. Karen interjected, them giving up the right to emasculate men is the only guarantee. The only real guarantee is not to emasculate men. To Kimberly's surprise, Claudia shook her head. Even that's not a guarantee. Giving up the right to emasculate is only the beginning. Using the hero's language rightly requires a series of transformations. Take yourself, for example. You, Karen, have been challenged to let go of years of anger and resentment towards Mike to use the provide and needs words appropriately. Karen sighed and nodded her agreement. And you, Kimberly, Claudia said gently, reaching for her hand, are having to rethink your precious self-sufficiency and value drummed into you since childhood to allow Roll and Jack and your team to take care of you. She's right, Kimberly thought, and I never would have been willing to without support and real-life role models. That's true, Kimberly replied, and I could not have done it without you and Gramps. She turned purposely towards Karen. No, without you and Mike as an example of what a partnership could be. When she looked back at Claudia, she was relieved to see her smiling. Perhaps great relationships between men and women are beyond the reach of all of us individually, Claudia stressed. That is why it is an area in which we all need help. Odd that she emphasized that word, Kimberly observed, and it dawned to her. Is that the next word in the hero's language? She received a gratifying pat on the hand, and Claudia answered, Yes, my dear, you are correct. Help is the topic for today. One of them? Karen responded, looking up for the fresh notes. Yes, one of them. There are 2 words in the hero language that are closely related. I intend to teach them both today, with Bert's help, that is. To Kimberly's surprise, Claudia waved, and shortly thereafter, Bert emerged from his workshop. Bert had been tinkering with his 2-part project carefully not to engage in anything that couldn't be interrupted. Keeping an eye on the women through the window at his workbench, he'd seen the emotional roller coaster play out in their features and body language. He was relieved to see their composure shift from the anticipation of doom to a new hopeful and resolute demeanor. He crossed the yard with long strides, carrying a folding chair with him. When Kimberly saw the chair, she responded by scooting closer to Karen. Bert smiled and sat down between his two favorite women. He scanned Claudia's face and immediately noted that she was already tuckered out. I gotta shoulder some of this somehow, or change the way she's approaching these lessons. He rubbed his hands together and turned to his beloved wife. How can I help? She smiled and gently squeezed his upper arm. He resisted the urge to flex his bicep. Still want to impress my girl, he thought with a smile. Thank you, my love. You could start by explaining to Kimberly and Karen what the word help means to you. Bert had to overcome his initial reaction that it was obvious what help meant. He knew Claudia would only ask him for something that really mattered to her. Then he realized that while his reaction to the word was immediate and compelling, he had never articulated what it meant. He had to think about it for a while. Luckily, the three women waited patiently. In general, he finally said, needing help means you are in over your head. The thing you are trying to accomplish is beyond your strength, your knowledge, or your abilities, or your resources. He continued, warming to the subject. You might know that you need help from the beginning. That's best because then you can set it up. But sometimes you find out a project is beyond you when you're in the middle of it, that it's not a pleasant realization for a man to think he can do something and find out he can't. We'll ask for help because we won't give up the result we're after. He was thinking if he had anything else when Karen said, I'm sorry to interrupt, Bert, but if a woman needs help, doesn't a man despise her for being helpless? Bert was surprised by the question. Not normally. There is no shame in needing help. He thought for a moment. But it depends on what she needs help with. If the simplest things in life are beyond her, then he'll think she's helpless indeed, and he may provide what she needs temporarily, but it'll nearly be impossible for him to commit to a lifetime of that. He elaborated. Men in general want the strongest, most capable woman they can find for a partner. It's to their advantage, but that doesn't mean that they don't want to help her. Life brings problems and we all get in too deep sometimes. That's what a wife or husband is for, to build together, to be companions, to enjoy and witness each other's life, to help them get through the tough spots. Unexpectedly, Karen had reached for a tissue. Bert was focused on the topic and hadn't noticed that both young women were teary-eyed. Did I say something wrong? Simultaneously, they shook their heads. Karen spoke first. No, Bert, you said something very right. I don't mean to be prejudiced, but I had no idea a man could articulate a marriage so well. Claudia responded before he could. Men do not get credit for their wisdom about partnership. In fact, while they instinctively compete and conceal, men are more compelled to partnership than women are. But isn't it always women who want to get married? Kimberly asked. Claudia shook her head with some sadness. A compulsion to get married is not the same as a desire to partner. Huh? It is a long topic, Kimberly, Claudia responded. Perhaps one day we'll discuss it. For now, know that helping each other is an honorable thing to do, and there is no shame in needing help. The bigger your commitments, the more help you're going to need. Bert nodded at the obvious truth in her statement and added, often the bigger your commitments, the more we want to help. It is an honor to be chosen to help someone we admire. Bert watched as the expressions on Karen and Kimberly's face compelled Claudia to elaborate. A person who is determined to be self-sufficient has to keep his or her life and their goals small enough to manage single-handedly, to make sure they never need help. I'm not sure I'm getting this, Karen declared. Bert looked to Claudia to see if she wanted him to respond. She took his hand and answered Karen's implied request. This gathering is a perfect example. If I were not committed to making this information available to the women who are ready for it, I would not need your help. You need my help? Karen asked, astonished. I thought I needed yours. Claudia smiled. That is what makes this beginning a great partnership. I want you to teach the material as badly as you want to teach it. We are helping each other. She turned towards Bert and smiled appreciation from her shiny eyes. And I need Bert's help to teach this topic and the next without exhausting myself. What's the topic? Kimberly interjected. Not quite yet, Claudia replied. Bert, is there anything else you want to say about the word help? Bert scratched his head thinking, only that the word help has a way of interrupting whatever a man is focused on. It penetrates his intense concentration if it's shouted. He'll draw his sword and come running before he even knows what the enemy is facing. Claudia turned toward the young woman. I call this reaction. Yes? What? And it is one of my favorite things about men. Can you explain? Karen asked. Certainly, Claudia replied, looking happy for the question. Bert thought, maybe this happiness is worth the exhaustion. If you ask a man for help, he will really say, that depends, the way a woman might. His usual response is, yes, what? He commits himself to helping before he even knows what is needed. That is how compelled he is to help. It is part of his nature, as a provider. Bert nodded. Absolutely. A woman asking for help drills right into a man. I feel it in my chest. If I can help, I will. But what if you can't? Karen asked. I'll be disappointed if I can't provide what she needs, and I'll probably go looking for someone who can, and as another way of being helpful. Claudia reached for him again. Karen, Bert was the one who suggested I find someone like you. When I was hopeless, convinced I would die with this treasure, he helped me open my eyes. My pleasure is to serve, sweetheart, Bert added gallantly. Then may I ask for you to help to explain the difference between asking for help and needing to be saved? Claudia replied. Oh, boy, Bert responded immediately. Unlike the fairy tale princesses, real men do not like having to save someone. Why not? Karen asked. Usually, if a woman needs to be saved, it means she didn't say what she needed or ask for help in a timely manner. It often means she failed to prepare appropriately or to anticipate accurately. We'll still save her, but it'll come with a lecture. And if we have to keep saving her from the same thing, we'll really get annoyed and try to fix the problem permanently. Karen groaned. Oh. Yes, Karen, Bert couldn't help but to respond. My life is flashing before my eyes. Every year before winter break, I get overwhelmed by all the special events. Inevitably, Mike has to come to my rescue with cupcakes or utensils or picking up last-minute gifts for the principal and office staff. She laughed ruefully. It's exactly like what you said. He does it, but he grumbles and he gives me a lecture about how I could have anticipated it and prepared better, since it happens year after year. A smart man will always choose an ounce of prevention over a pound of cure, he replied simply, especially when the pound of cure comes out of his time and energy. He watched his granddaughter's face show the connection she was making. Yes, Kimberly, he encouraged. You spoke about this before when we were learning about providing. How a man will measure the energy something requires against the value of the outcome, she responded. Cheerfully. That's it exactly. Saving someone from impending disaster almost always requires more energy than preventing it. A man will resent that extra expenditure and want to make sure it isn't required again. We enjoy solving problems, but we don't enjoy solving the same problem over and over and over again. Hence the lecture. Karen's face looked like she was having an unpleasant recollection. Yes, Karen, he prompted. I've always resisted and resented the lecture. In the moment, I've thought that his rescue wasn't worth it, she sighed. Now I see why his lecture was totally deserved and I should have graciously agreed. And it would have been even smarter to implement his suggestions. That would have been a good way to show appreciation as well, Claudia commented, and Bert smiled, adding, yes, taking a man's advice shows him that he is appreciated and trusted. It's very important. Thinking he'd said all he wanted to, Bert asked Claudia, is there anything else you need my help with? There is one other thing, she replied. Rescuing a woman in an emergency or from a situation she created herself is one kind of saving that men are compelled to provide. I was hoping you could talk about how men are compelled to save women from other kinds of dragons, like drudgery and discomfort. Bert chuckled. It's true. We want to save you from everything ugly, but only because women are special. We invent gadgets and appliances to save your time and energy. We like to solve your problems and save you that effort as well. He smiled. We'd rather you women spent your lives creating the magic that only you can, when your bodies and spirits aren't weighed down. And we'd much rather be uncomfortable ourselves than have one of you priceless creatures be cold or hot, hungry or thirsty, he chuckled again. Most men will agree that civilization was created for women. We'd be content with caves and campfires. Claudia smiled up at him, his eyes shining, and he knew he'd provided what she needed. He got up and kissed her soft cheek. Tipping an imaginary hat, he made his exit. "Thank you, Bert," was chimed with 3 distinct, lovely female voices. Karen marveled at the concise way Bert could make his point. Listening to a man talk about the language of heroes added a special dimension and weight to their lessons. "What do you think?" Claudia asked, interrupting her reverie. Glancing at Kimberly to see who should respond to her first, she noticed the other woman was deep in thought as well. "I think I'm going to have to ask for help sooner and need to be saved less," Karen replied, modeling Bert and cutting to the chase. Kimberly stirred. "I'm going to get a bigger life." "In what way?" Claudia asked. Kimberly struggled to answer. "It's not clear yet. I just know that I really need help." She turned to Karen. "I work all the time, but I don't have anything in my life like your commitment to help other women. You sit there taking notes furiously, giving every word down. For yourself? No. You do it to spread the word and to help others. I admire that, and until this moment I thought you were the only one who should do it." Karen watched as a beatific smile spread across Claudia's face. She couldn't help but laugh. When Kimberly looked annoyed, Karen nodded toward Claudia. "Look at her, Kimberly. You have arrived at the great plan." Karen sat back and joined the exchange of expression between grandmother and granddaughter as Kimberly realized that this was what Claudia had intended all along. Claudia looked alternately busted and satisfied. She finally settled on an expression resembling the proverbial cat that ate the canary. Karen felt happy knowing she was part of a great gift to the woman she admired most. To Kimberly, she said, "I guess you'll be needing my notes." Awesome. I want those notes. Kimberly breathed deeply and smiled. The 3 of them sat quietly for a while, basking in the glow of conspiracy. It feels good to be part of something important, Kimberly thought, and was reminded of Rawls' comment. Maybe I'm the one who'll bring this to the office. "Grandmother?" "Yes, dearest." "You've probably already noticed, but could I go back to calling you grandmother?" Kimberly asked. "Of course you can. I only suggested the other to help you get through the rough spots," Claudia responded. "Thanks. It did help then, but," Kimberly hesitated. "Claudia feels too distant from me now." She paused. "Before we start for today, could you help me with something, or are you too tired?" Claudia seemed alarmed by her question, and Kimberly wondered, are we supposed to pretend we haven't noticed? "I am not too tired. What can I help you with?" Claudia answered. "I've begun a relationship, sort of, with the man I told you about, Jack." Kimberly saw Karen smile and sit up more attentively. "And, well, he has a lot of opinions, strong opinions. Some of them I really appreciate, probably because they are very strong opinions which approve of me, and some of them make me feel a bit defensive. Do you have a suggestion about how I could handle it?" Claudia perked up, and Kimberly felt less guilty about asking for more. Claudia asked, "Did I ever teach you listening to learn?" I don't think so," Karen responded. "The only kind of listening I know of is when you wait 30 seconds longer. I taught it to Kimberly a few weeks ago, like you said." Kimberly jumped in. "She did teach me that, and I've been practicing it. Most of the time it's amazing, but in this case, it gives Jack more time to express more opinions. And when I disagree, I'm afraid to say so. I'm afraid it would be emasculating, but I don't know what else to do. I don't want to pretend to agree when I don't. I've been keeping quiet." Claudia nodded sympathetically. "I am aware of that pickle." She relaxed back against her seat. "The kind of listening when you give them time to think is called waiting for the well. The kind of listening you need is called listening to learn. Would you like me to teach it to you?" "Oh, please," Kimberly exclaimed, and Karen nodded vigorously, adding, "Mike's got a boatload of opinions, too." Kimberly flipped to a new page and nodded for Claudia to begin. Kimberly briefly thought that she should be taking notes but decided against it. Karen's got that pot covered, she concluded. I learned better by listening. A man's opinions are formed from two sources, Claudia said cheerfully. The first source is his values. These are the qualities that express his identity, who he is as a person and as a man. The one way to think of the stages of development is as a struggle to clarify and make manifest his values. As a king, Mike's values are rock solid. Karen nodded and Kimberly made a mental note to ask her all about the stages of development. There's more to this king business than I thought. Claudia continued. Mike has also plenty of time to collect the second source of opinions, trusted information. Can you give me an example of that? Karen interjected. Most men love maps. They are a trusted source of information. They would rather spend a few dollars at the gas station to buy a map than ask a gas station attendant for directions. One is a proven source, the other is too risky. You mean there's even a good reason men don't ask for directions? Kimberly asked. Of course, Claudia replied, smiling. Men have a good reason for everything they do. Some are more difficult to figure out. Can you give me another example? Kimberly asked. I can give you numerous examples, Claudia nodded. You might notice that a metropolitan area like ours has several newspapers. Not everyone trusts the same source. Or you might suggest to a man that he speaks to someone you know about something he is working on. Unless you make a good case for why that person is worth listening to, he will never act on it. That explains a lot, Karen responded. For some reason, men trust books over people, or degrees versus experience. I can go both ways on that. The point is that men combine their values with the information they trust to form an opinion. This is why two men with the same information could have different opinions. By having different values that they apply that to information to. Forming an opinion is a conscious and committed act. Forming an opinion is a conscious and committed act. That is why they defend their opinions to death. Kimberly asked. This topic was proving more interesting than she anticipated. A man vigorously defends his opinions because they are always an expression of himself. He is not merely defending a thought, he is defending himself. Claudia smiled. Understanding what an opinion is made of is the key to understanding how to listen to them. Oh, that's how. And how's that? Claudia sipped her tea and Kimberly studied her face. She seems to truly enjoy this, but it still wears her out. Claudia carefully set her cup, and it's called listening to learn as opposed to the way people normally listen to another's opinion, which is to agree or disagree. I'm not supposed to agree or disagree, Karen said, interrupting her note-taking. Claudia replied, it is not about supposed to, it is about the results you want. If you listen to someone expressing her or his opinion to see whether you agree or disagree, the results are predictable. If you agree as a woman, you will feel more connected and safe. You will be compelled to tell them you agree in order that they feel the connection too. Kimberly could easily remember times when she'd done exactly that. Women responded enthusiastically, recalling a time when she agreed to roll. She couldn't quite decipher the look on his face. Grandmother? Yes, dear? You said as a woman, and it doesn't seem like men react the same. When I've told Rollo that I agree with him, it doesn't seem like he feels more connected because of that. For some reason, he's really annoyed. Claudia laughed. Yes, they are annoyed to be interrupted. To them, your agreement merely means you see the correctness of their opinion. So you would have interrupted to state the obvious. It does not validate them in any way or make them feel a connection. And what happens when we disagree? Karen asked. As women, if we are disagreeing with the opinion being expressed, we mostly want whomever to stop talking about it, Claudia explained. Because with each word, women feel more distance from the other person, and that makes women feel anxious and disconnected. Kimberly could see now why she'd asked about opinions in the first place. When Jack expressed a strong opinion about their age difference, she could feel the warm connection between them breaking down. That made her anxious, and she changed the subject to try to reestablish the good feelings. It's a good thing he's so responsive to me, she thought. Other men have been like a train on a track, and I couldn't change the topic. And what happens if you express disagreement to a man, Karen asked. As long as you present it respectfully, they will be fine, Claudia replied. But do not expect them to welcome it. Your sources of information may be challenged, and possibly your values. Kimberly was now even more interested in an alternative. Sounds like we really need this listening to learning thing. Both agreeing and disagreeing led to places I don't want to go. Kimberly smiled. Very good, Kimberly. Agreeing and disagreeing are still options when you need them, but listening to learn will create more understanding and more intimacy. Kimberly liked that idea. And how do we do it exactly? When someone is stating an opinion, catch yourself in the mode of agreeing and disagreeing. It will be there because it is the human default. Then switch to thinking a question in your mind. What matters to this person? Or what are they showing me is important to them? Either question will do. Listen for their values, that expression of who they are. Kimberly thought about Jack's adamant opinion regarding age differences in relationships. He had also included income, religion, and politics. It sounds like a relationship being about the day-to-day satisfaction of the people in it is what's important to him. He doesn't want it based on beliefs and circumstances, but aren't those important too? Grandmother? Yes, dear. How do you know if someone will make a good partner? Claudia frowned. That is a big question and a very good one. One I cannot answer today. She patted Kimberly's hand at her unconcealed disappointment. I can tell you that listening to learn is the place to start. If, as you discover more about them, you find that you admire them and are aligned with their values, then they might make a good partner or a good friend. Oh, Kimberly thought, that's why Melissa and I have been growing apart. My values have changed and we're not aligned anymore. But Jack and I seem to be in sync. So far, anyway. Contemplating on her evening plans, her stomach lurched and her pulse sped up. She wanted to ask her for more, but her own embarrassment and her grandmother's obvious fatigue stopped her. Thank you, you're right. That is a great place to stop. Bert noticed the lady saying goodbyes. He put the finishing touches on the last coat of varnish and admired his handiwork. Both items had turned out beautifully. When the varnish completely dried, he would add the hardware he acquired at the specialty store they would be ready. He wasn't sure when he'd present his gifts, but he knew the perfect moment would make itself clear. He found Claudia on the couch with her eyes closed. At least she's not back in bed, he thought, finding small comfort. But now I know what's happening. He took up his station at her feet and began rubbing. When she opened her sleepy blue eyes, he said, waiting for you to call me over to help. I watched you today. I'm no doctor, but I figured out what's exhausting you. Her eyes widened in interest, and she struggled to sit up. After she got herself situated with the cushion, she cocked her head and said, yes? He replied, I'm tempted to walk you down a garden path like you do with Karen and Kimberly to help you figure it out yourself. She smiled delighted. I only do that because it is fun and they still value self-efficiency. I have no such hang-ups, as they say. Come right out and tell me. No one knows me better than you. Okay then, he said. The problem is not in what you are doing. It is in how you are behaving. And how is that, she asked. Today, I saw you in a way that I've rarely seen you, as a man. As a man? Claudia asked, confused. Yes, sweetheart, he replied. I let my vision blur for a moment, and I saw not the lovely woman I adored for 50-some-odd years. I saw the essence of a man in how you were behaving. Really, and how was I behaving? She prompted, agitated enough to completely forget her own rule about waiting and listening. Bert laughed. You're right. This garden path thing is fun, but you told me not to do it, he straightened. Here is the plaint. You were being accountable. I could see the weight of it on your shoulders, in your face, the way you leaned in forward as you spoke, willing them to learn. Comprehension slowly dawned on her beautiful face. You're absolutely correct, my love, she sighed and knitted her hands together, thoughtfully pursed lips. I have been being accountable for them, embracing the Queen's Code. He nodded. Yes, and it is exhausting you. She nodded in turn. Yes, as a woman, I can task from dawn to dark with no consequence if I have no hard deadline. But accountability requires testosterone. It's a natural state of being for you gentlemen. But while we can obviously be accountable over time, it exhausts women. With a fraction of your testosterone, it tires us even at a hormonal level. Bert was intrigued. He'd only observed her behavior and her body language. As usual, he marveled at the breadth of her knowledge. Does that mean women should never be accountable? He asked. She shook her head. No, it means that they need to accept accountability consciously. And when it is a great privilege, as being a mother it can be, or having a project that brings great good to the world, or working for someone whom you admire. She sighed again. And then they need to take extra good care of themselves, knowing being accountable will tire them beyond what it looks like they are getting done. He waited, and after a moment she shook her head sadly. I am more than passionate about my sessions with Kimberly and Karen. It is the fulfillment of my life's work. It is hard to imagine not being accountable. Isn't there an alternative where you can contribute without being accountable? Bert asked, anxious for a solution. Claudia brightened. There is an alternative. What? I need to switch modes, so to speak, from providing to supporting and enhancing, she paused. I need to let Karen and Kimberly be accountable for their education and their transformation. She smiled in contemplation and finally took a very deep breath. As she exhaled, Bert saw the weight lift from her shoulders. Then Claudia did something she hadn't done in a long time. She crawled over to his end of the couch and snuggled onto his lap, arms around his neck. Her eyes twinkling bright, she kissed him warmly on the cheek and said, Once again, you are my hero. Bert felt his chest swell. He wrapped his long arms around her with great affection and without fear. Karen, famished, ate her entire sandwich before getting to work on her notes. As lessons went, this wasn't the worst. It had still rocked her world. Like most women, Karen prided herself on self-sufficiency and guarded her independence. It was painfully clear how much that prevented her from being a partnership with Mike. It consistently stopped her from letting him help her and thereby protecting his own life and energy. Some partner I've been, she thought, I'm not letting him help until it's an emergency is not doing him a favor. She reviewed her notes and decided there were at least 2 flip charts to make. The first was about listening to learn. I wish I'd known that 20 years ago. Mike has always had strong opinions. Come to think of it, even the young boys in my class do. Values are an expression of ourselves. Values plus trust plus trusted information equals opinions. Opinions are an expression of who men are. Listening, agree, disagree creates a false sense of connectedness or distance that men don't care about. Men reveal themselves in their opinions. Listening to learn allows us to discover who we are. Listen with a question, what matters to him or her, or what's important to him or her, or what is he or she showing me about himself or herself. Listening to learn creates understanding and intimacy. The second flip chart had to do with the hero's language of words, of help and save. Since one has a version of the other, it seems best to combine them. Help is a word that interrupts single focus. A man will come running with sword drawn. It's not shameful to need help. It means you're in over your head, which happens when you have goals and projects. Men are often honored to help someone they admire. Helpless means everyday life overwhelms you. Not good. Men will respond but rarely commit. They dread the loss of energy. A sincere, will you help me, will get the response, yes, what, or yes, how, or yes, when. Saving is help in an emergency. If it could have been prevented or anticipated, the saving will come with a lecture. It takes a lot more energy to save than to help. Karen felt that captured the essence of those 2 words. She was determined to remember the distinction and try to anticipate a need for help from Mike. He had proved he was always willing, but if his help could be planned for and scheduled, like last week's meals, he was a lot happier about it. Reviewing her notes to create flip charts, Karen noticed how many times Bert had used the word problem, and that he talked about enjoying solving problems. Could problem be another word for hero? I'll have to ask Claudia. She finished with their summaries. Karen turned to the assignments. Homework. Use the word help sincerely in asking men and boys for something that you need and either could not provide yourself or your life would be better if they helped you with. Second, thank them again using the word help. 3. Pay attention to all the things that men do to save me from something, be it danger or drudgery. 4. Acknowledge them sincerely using the word save word. As she finished, Karen noticed how this ritual calmed her down and prepared her for being with Mike. Each week there had been something monumentous to talk to him about. Today she needed to apologize and thank him. Anticipating both felt surprisingly good. Kimberly woke up groggy, momentarily confused by the strange surroundings. When she recognized where she was, she stretched her hand to the side of the enormous bed. It was empty. By the angle of the sun streaming through the window above her head, she must have slept quite late. She sat up and looked at the details of Jack's bedroom. I was too busy last night, she thought with a smile. The dark furniture contrasted nicely with the subtle green walls and elegant but not ornate crown molding. The simplified version of the traditional combination made a nice backdrop for a surprising collection of modern art. Eclectic, she mused. I like it. Satisfied with her assessment, she snuggled back under the covers and contemplated last night, and early this morning, she thought, reminding herself of the continuous exploration of each other's enjoyment. From the moment he had unbuttoned her blouse, kissing her collarbone from end to end, she was in ecstasy. Gone were the feelings of shame and fear of self-consciousness. When have I laughed during sex? Never before. Jack had been skillful, considerate, and communicative partner. Their discussions beforehand had made all the awkwardness of the first-time intimacy disappear. In its place were warmth and safety, play and pleasure. Kimberly came out of her delicious reverie to find Jack standing in the doorway watching her contentedly, breakfast tray in hand. Walking towards her, he smiled and said, "Good morning, beautiful." Surprised, she realized what she felt, that she did feel beautiful, thanks to him, and more resolved than ever to live by the Queen's Code. Melissa was afraid and angry. A week had passed and she had been left on her front porch shouting at Kimberly's retreating form. In a friendship that spanned more than 2 decades, they had their share of disagreements. Even jealous spats when as teens they'd fallen for the same guy. But never anything as terrible as this. She sat in front of her computer and emailed Kimberly unopened. Had no subject. Would it be an apology? Another accusation? Steeling herself, she clicked on the message. Dear Melissa, your friendship has meant the world to me. We've been through everything together. No one has ever been close to me than you. As you have noted, my values have recently changed and I'm going in a different direction. Away from anger, blame, and bitterness. Away from frustration, confusion, and strategy. Toward partnership and understanding. Will we part our ways now? I keep hoping you'll come with me. I keep hoping you'll find the courage to look at yourself and men in a new way. I keep hoping you will be willing to have been wrong about Scott, to have been wrong about all men. They are much more everything than we ever knew. Is there any chance you'll consider another way of relating to men? If and when, I will be here. Until then, love always, Kimberly. Melissa read and reread the email. She's breaking up with me, she thought, furious. Damn those man lessons. Damn her grandmother. Damn Scott. Damn all of them. Even though it was only midday, Melissa made herself a gin and tonic and gave into despair. Mike was enjoying the new rhythm developing between them. Ordinarily, Karen would be in a vegetative state for the first few days of the school break. Then she would emerge and attack home improvement projects like a bandage and attempt to accomplish them all on her own. He'd have to watch her struggle, rejecting assistance until she admitted she couldn't reach something or couldn't lift something or couldn't manage the power tool she was determined to use. This time it only took 1 day for her to have a vacation ambitions. She attributed to him being the food hero for the week before. He thought the word hero was a bit overblown, but that didn't prevent him from liking it. Sunday morning she rose early and asked him over for breakfast. Is there a time today when you could help me with something? He still remembered how she giggled when he said, Yes, what? Since then, every morning she asked for time for her help when it worked on his schedule. It was reassuring. He no longer worried that he'd get on a panic call in the middle of the day, and he looked forward to the time he set aside to help her. It also gave Mike a chance to watch for signs. He seemed to be completely oblivious. He was impressed that when she said she would focus on sex instead of getting pregnant, that she meant it. And undoubtedly, the sex life had been reborn, better than ever before. Karen had probably forgotten that he'd put her ovulation and projected periods on his work calendar. It had been self-defense. He had to keep track of when he'd get text to rush home for sperm donation, or when she'd be in tears because she wasn't pregnant and he needed an extra measure of compassion. According to his schedule, her period was several days late. He smiled to himself, standing a bit taller, feeling quite like the Studley cowboy. Yippee-ki-yay! Claudia hung up the phone with a smile. After centuries of validating their studies of men and women antecedentally, modern medicine was proving proof. Functional MRIs revealed brain activity and normal blood tests measured hormone levels. Doctors like Lou Ann Brizendine had put the two together to understand the behavior of men and women biologically. Today, medical science had validated Bert's observations. "Why are you smiling?" Bert asked, entering the kitchen. "That was the doctor. The test results came back, and she said I have been under an unusual stress lately." Bert snorted. "I think we established that." "And so has she," Claudia nodded. "My blood had elevated levels of cortisol, the stress hormone. You could call it the accountability hormone. It shows up when women go into man mode. It almost explains why I have acquired some extra belly fat." He hugged her from behind and rubbed her tummy. "Is that what you call this?" "I call it bonus curves." She turned around and looked up at him. "The point is, you were right, even according to modern medicine. I only care that I am right for you," he said gruffly, and kissed her forehead. "And I am glad to have my queen back." And that is the end of chapter 7. The next is chapter 8, and I will do that shortly. So I hope you're enjoying this book as much as I am, and I will talk to you all soon. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.